Okay, we'll call the meeting to order, and we'll start with the pledge tonight.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, start with the approval of the agenda. Any changes, additions? Paul?
Nope.
Dan?
I have none.
No? Okay, entertaining a motion to approve, I'm sorry, we need to remove on the consent agenda A2G3, the LRS Minnesota LLC did not get their paperwork in for the refuse hauler licenses, so we'll remove that. With that, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
I'll make that motion.
Thanks, Dan. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thanks, Mel. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. On the consent agenda, any questions or comments for staff on the consent agenda? Okay, with that, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
I'll make the motion to approve.
Thank you, Paul. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thanks, Mel. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. No visitors tonight. Mayor's report. The only thing I have...
Public forum?
That's next.
Oh, that's...
After the... Yep.
I'm so sorry.
No, you're fine. Just would like to mention that former police chief Dave Johnson passed away, I think, Monday night, so condolences to his family and appreciate his service to the city of Casson for all the years he was here, so our thoughts and prayers are with his family. And now on to public forum. I have one card. Cassie. Public, yep. That's Linda.
Actually, I just wanted to say I didn't partially agree with the letter that Tim submitted into the agenda packet on my departure. I did write this a little bit. I'm a little bit nervous of speaking up front in front of other people. I'm good one-on-one, but in a group, I'm a little bit nervous. So I did write this. I just wanted to say that I love performing my UB duties in the position I hold. Due to the past year events, I could no longer consistently perform these duties due to a toxic office environment. I'm not a welcome team member. I have tried several occasions to build these relationships, from having new management, unacceptable verbal write-ups, and personnel giving reviews that shouldn't be. I love this community. I have served it for 8 years, building relationships with customers. I have a lot of customers that come in here on a monthly basis just to see me. So every time I've taken care of customers, everyone says, thank you, thank you, thank you. I've only heard on a couple occasions negative complaints. I've never been brought to my attention of any in particular complaint. A lot of the time that I've been here, I've been doing nothing but covering office duties and performing my normal duties. That was mostly due to coworkers being on a medical leave or short staff. I have always been flexible to have many objects and projects thrown at me. For example, having 3 reading systems at one time just for 1 month. That was very hard to do. I know I have excellent time management. Technical issues and bad tools and multiple interruptions play a big part in that. Just ask the council here that live here if you've gotten your bills in a timely fashion over the last 8 years. There have been some technical issues. We have the tools that we have to work with aren't up to date. That's why we are changing operating systems. So there are a lot of things that have been changed in the billing formats, if you've noticed that, especially in the e-billing. I've spent a lot of time revising that and to make sure the clarity is good for the customer when they receive it. We did have a problem with mass billing this last month. Apparently, I'm not sure why Black Mountain used the wrong date, but I did resend a second copy of e-bills, and it was the correct one. I only received a couple calls saying, hey, you sent me 2 bills. Do I have to pay 2 bills? No, the second one is the correct one. So I did resend that right away. So the technical issues and interruptions play a big part of it. I went to bat for my job this past fall, but the events that happened from December to February had a negative impact on me. There is evidence of threats, harassment, discrimination, quiet firing, mocking, inappropriate statements, being outcast for the past year. And those are my reasons why I am going to be looking for other employment. Apparently, in the month of November, the toxic environment did stop towards me and others. It did come to a meeting, and then after I came back from conference, it started back up again. It continued through December, all of January. January was complete. It was very frustrating for me. I had the phone lines were reconstructed for utility billing. All the calls to come into utility billing was supposed to be an overflow. I had over 162 missed phone calls in that whole month, all the way up to February 15th, and that's not counting all the phone calls that I answered. One day, I answered phone calls all day. As I was answering phone calls, I had voicemail after voicemail, so I was answering calls, then I was answering voicemails continuously. So I could say I probably had another couple hundred phone calls just all in the month of January. Within the last week, the phones have been corrected, which I thank you very much for doing that. So, those calls are not late. So, unfortunately, I'm ahead on the Tyler process. I have UB ready by the end of December. When no one else is ready, I went to conference. I actually liked the conference. I actually liked all the content in the conference. The only thing I didn't like is that there was no other female to be able to spend my entertainment time with after hours. That's the only thing that I didn't really care for. All the other men were in groups and together and drinking very heavily and partying, and I just would have a drink and go back to my room. So if there was other people to be able to spend that entertainment time with, I would be okay. But other than that, I did learn a lot, and I really did enjoy it. When I came back, I was re-energized. Then when I was re-energized, I went to work, went to bat, I felt really good. I got everything ready for Tyler for the first run for a data transfer, database, so they could get some guidelines on where we were at. I was told that the first run usually doesn't go very smoothly. I had everything ready and in order for them for it to run smoothly, and it did. And I'm very grateful for that. That's pretty much about it. After I came back in December, before the city administrator left on the leave, I got a verbal write-up, which was unacceptable in my part. It was about customer complaints and about a cash payment that was supposedly came into the office. Apparently, that cash payment came in during the time I was at conference, but it ended up on my verbal write-up. Apparently, customer complaints is a very hard issue in my position. I deal with most of all the complaints, and I do it by procedure. That's the way I work. I'm mostly by procedure. I don't like to change procedures as I go unless it's something that you can change and then it works good for you and it's a good change, then you want to stay with it. That's fine. But concrete procedures, I usually just stay right with the correct procedures. That's about it. That's all I have to say. Just wanted to let you know my side of the story. If you have any other comments, want to know any more in detail, I was not asked in my pre-review session for any other details. I only gave a couple examples throughout the month. I have more. If anyone would like to talk to me about any of the details that I've talked about or discussed, feel free to contact me. I have nothing to hide. I have documentation, I have pictures, I have video, I have audio, anything that you want. I have nothing to hide, I will give it to you.
Thanks, Cassie. Appreciate it. Okay, on to the committee report, Planning Commission. Number 1, landscaping ordinance amendments.
All right, so there was a public hearing held at Monday night's Planning Commission meeting regarding the general landscaping section of the City of Casson's ordinances. There was a rather long discussion and various amendments were proposed. I do believe I got most of them within the proposed changes included within the ordinances tonight. So I'll just go through some of the main ones here. Basically, the reasoning for these changes is to allow more flexibility within the code as it gets applied to development projects. And within that, there were a couple of recent projects that came through that had some issues with complying with the ordinance as written, and so a lot of what the proposed changes include now are allow flexibility in cases when that happens. So basically, the zoning administrator now has the ability to approve alternative compliance when there are certain conditions that exist. And so with that, they can do other things that, you know, improve aesthetics and that sort of thing. And then additionally, there's some revisions to the specific part of landscaping that involves parking areas, changing required number of tree species, and changing some requirements of size of plantings to more guidelines for plantings. That's what I've got, if there are any questions.
Okay. Any comments from our Planning Commission members?
It was definitely a good, thorough discussion, I believe. I mean, there was lots of questions asked and ideas thrown out, and we tried to work together to make it work with the city and make it an ordinance that if we're going to have it, that we can actually enforce instead of putting stuff in there that we're never going to enforce.
Okay. And as far as public comment, was there
There was none.
We did have people there at the prior meeting in February. Well, we didn't have a quorum, so we had to run
Sure.
it again, so. I do have 3 things here.
Yep.
First of all, just a typographical error. You added the alternative compliance as number 2, and then you left down 4 at the bottom. That probably should be 3, where it says compliance : so that just needs to get changed.
4 should be 3.
Yeah, because you moved
That's right, yep.
You moved the 3 to a 2 and then
Yep.
missed the 4 at the bottom,
Yep.
that's all. Under section D, where you add other qualified individual, what exactly are some examples of other qualified individuals, I guess, that would be acceptable for that? I'm just curious, because...
Well, basically that comes from, I'm a little bit familiar with the registered landscape architect. There's only maybe 300, 400 or so in the state, and so I just feel to require a registered landscape architect to be involved with any of the large developments may be a bit restrictive.
Okay, so are there like landscape architects that are not registered that would be acceptable?
I guess an example would be Brandon. Brandon's not a registered landscape architect, but if he designed a landscape plan, I would probably accept, maybe I'd accept it, I might accept it, I probably would. So I think, you know, in his office, he has a number of people who maybe wouldn't be at that registration level, but we would allow
It's really
them to-
about whether it's registered or not.
Yeah, I think that's where, I think the whole gist of the conversation on Monday night was to try and broaden the scope to allow for more flexibility, and I think that's kind of what you're going for here, isn't it, Ian?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. And then, in section F, I believe at the meeting we discussed curbing, and I didn't see any of that in here, so I'm wondering, did we kind of leave that language out and leave it up to the city to determine whether curbing is necessary based upon drainage requirements, or?
Curbing is actually included within another section of the code, specifically regarding off-street parking areas, and within that section it does say, you know, curbing is required unless the city engineer says that it would impede drainage, something along those lines. So I didn't include it in the landscaping section, just because it might be redundant, but...
That's fine then.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else have questions for Ian on the rewrite? Okay, thanks for your work on that, Ian. Any other comments or questions? Okay, entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion to approve.
Okay, do we have a second?
Yeah, I'll second.
Thanks, Paul. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, thank you. And then the buffer yards.
Yep, so there's another public hearing for a different section of the code. This one is specifically about buffer yards and screening. Really, the only recommendation that came out of the planning commission meeting was to add a definition for what a hedge is, or rather amend what was already in the code. And so the language that I have now says, if the buffer area contains a hedge, the hedge shall be landscaped as a linear planting of closely spaced evergreen trees or shrubs maintained to form a dense, continuous barrier or boundary measuring at least 6 feet in height at maturity.
I'm happy with that, Ian, that's good.
Okay, thank you.
There's a lot of discussion
You
about
answered all my questions.
the linear
Discussion
planting.
on hedges.
Okay.
It was a long meeting.
All right, that's good, all right, we got that hammered out. Is there any other comments or questions on that? It makes sense to me, so I'll entertain a motion to approve.
I'll make the motion.
Thanks, Paul, do we have a second?
I'll second that.
All right, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, thank you. On to number 3, preliminary plat for Egan Fields.
Yep, the final public hearing that was held on Monday was for the preliminary plat of Egan Fields. You'll note in the materials that I had sent out, it's just a proposed lot of 1 block for the new development by the Egan Company. With that, it was pretty straightforward, but there were a few conditions that were recommended as approval of the preliminary plat. Specifically that the development fees should be paid before the final plat is released for recording, and then another condition to record an access easement agreement and maintenance agreement. Specifically, that has to do with accessing the site, just because there's currently a street that dead ends right at the edge of the property, and so there was some debate about whether we should require a cul-de-sac, but the developer felt that that was maybe not the best solution, and so that's what we came up with instead. And then the third condition has to do with adding additional utility easements as recommended by the city engineer. And then finally, that the site plan that was submitted should be approved administratively before the development occurs.
Okay. All right, any comments, questions for Ian? Thank you, and thanks to Planning and Zoning for making that happen. I'll entertain a motion to approve the preliminary plat for Egan Fields.
I'll make that motion.
Thanks, Dan. Do I have a second?
Yeah, I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Thanks, Ian. Appreciate it. Just have one general question, comment. So as we are approving these things with these conditions, this is easy, right? Because before it's developed, we're going to follow through other. Are we following up on conditional use permits that we have issued for other things? I know we talked about that in the past as far as having a calendar where we say, hey, this is the condition, and in 2 years we're going to check it. Just planning that.
I know for some of them, we do, I mean, for example, like with Mr. Wilkers, that's something we definitely check every year. I mean, and that's probably coming up here in May or June. I think you did it last year in June.
Yeah.
I mean, for the most part, those are the ones that we are checking on a regular basis. So.
All right. Just wanted to, just triggered my mind on that.
Yep.
All right, new business sewer forgiveness request for 902 West Main, H1. That request is in your packet, and thanks, Tim, for coming up with that request form that's consistent for everybody so they can put it in there. Does everybody see what the issue was and the obvious sewer usage of, 14, 17, 21 went to 119,000. So that obviously fits our criteria. Is there any questions or comments on that from anybody? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve the sewer forgiveness request for 902 West Main.
I'll make the motion.
Thanks, Mel. Do I have a second?
Yeah, I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Also, a sewer forgiveness for Semcac. Similar situation. They had a malfunction. They fixed it. The application is there. Are there any questions on that for staff?
One thing just to highlight, so that number will, when we do the forgiveness for this one, it'll carry over into the next month too, because it was over a 2-month period where they did get it fixed, but I mean, he has that note on there. The 25,000 gallons over for this month already, so
Okay.
we take into account when we normalize that, it'll be down over 2.
Okay. Thank you. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
I'll make the motion.
Thanks, Dan. Second?
Yeah, I'll second.
Thanks, Paul. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Resolution for flood mitigation, number H.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
With these sewer forgiveness requests, is this something that we could potentially move to consent agendas in the future?
I would think so. If it's, the plan is there, it's all, the criteria is there, and then if somebody wants to pull it off to discuss it, we could.
Assuming staff would recommend we approve it, I would say too. right?
Sure, yeah, I mean, I think the reason I wanted to have these in there, part of it's the new form that we're
Yep.
using,
No,
so
it
it's
looks
good
good.
for everybody to see.
Mhm.
But other than that, yeah, I mean, and I will remind council, you know, what we're doing right now is a one-strikes policy. So basically, you know, folks who submit this, that's their freebie, and then we, you know, would come back and say, hey, you know, now you have to pay the bill. So that's kind of the policy we're utilizing. But yeah, I think that'd be appropriate to move into consent agenda moving forward.
Great, thank you. Resolution for flood mitigation, number 3 there. That has to do with our grant or funding from the state. Any comments from,
So just in order to access our, basically to make an agreement with the state of Minnesota, we have this resolution that's approved. You can read through it yourself, but it talks about the financial capability for us to be able to match that money. And in essence, we're saying that we're pledging that we'll fulfill our part of the agreement by matching up to $5 million with this project. And then that allows us to get an arrangement, you know, signed, an agreement signed, then we'd be able to access those funds.
okay. Any questions on that?
This, after this is done, we will have those funds, or is it still putting in an application to see if we get them?
No, we have the funds, they're allocated to us, it's a reimbursable program. So, I mean, typically, the way it works is that, you know, we'll spend those monies and then they'll be recouped. It's a little bit like our MSA dollars that we use for our
Okay, so this
16th
isn't
Street.
like, we have to submit an application and hope we get it? Like it's
No,
there
the
if we
state
want to
already,
use it?
but when they bonded, they did their bonding bill, they did approve the city for this. So,
Oh,
yep.
fantastic, okay.
So it's, if we come up with the project and do it, then we'll get reimbursed for it, since it's been
Great.
allocated last bonding fund. Yep. Any other questions? Brandon, anything you got on that? I mean, this gives us the latitude, you know, going forward, we can make it work, so. Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
I'll make that motion.
Thanks, Dan. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thanks, Mel. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Administrators report?
Oh, just a couple of things. We're still following that local zoning authority issue. I know we talked about that just a little bit at our work session last week. Housing Trust Fund, we're trying to work with them to market one of the lots that the city owns in the Vale subdivision, so that's something we're kind of working on as well. And then Ian and I went to the Ready meeting last week, which I think, I'm hoping that shows some good, you know, possibly we'll get some more business interest out of that. So, other than that, I've got a couple other things in your packet there. We've got the housing guidelines from Goodhue County, which that's what Dodge County looks like they're going to be adopting. Kind of a report from Enterprise on our vehicles from the previous year. We met with those folks as well from Enterprise. We have a new market representative in our area, and we'll be looking at what the vehicles look like for this year, and then just to highlight some of those priorities that were given to me. So we discussed those a little bit at our work session as well. So we'll continue to work on trying to get those fine-tuned as we move throughout the year.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions for Tim?
Yeah, with that city zoning thing, what of the proposals would you say would be most affecting us?
Well, the requirement to basically eliminate all kinds of density requirements. In
So-
essence,
So all residential is whatever density they want, is what,
yeah.
rather than we can restrict to single family?
And that's kind of the gist of it, really, at the end of the day. I mean, there wouldn't really be any ability to have single-family anymore, so you'd be minimal. I think there are 7 categories, and you'd have to allow at least 5 of those. And I'd have to go back and look exactly which 5 we thought would work, but duplexes, quadplexes, sixplexes, apartments, that kind of thing. I think the biggest issue that we run into is some areas of town don't have the infrastructure support for that kind of density.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I think this is probably it's not going to be very good from a one-size-fits-all. You know, that's the issue we're going to run into and I think that's hopefully what the League of Minnesota Cities and some of the other groups that are pushing back on this are making that case that, you know, just because you own a lot and you want to put a fourplex on it, if it isn't supportable with sewer or water, that kind of thing, then you shouldn't be forcing that into that, you know, system.
Would the city legally be required to update the infrastructure if somebody chose to forego our mornings and?
No, all those things would have to be figured out, and I don't know the answer to that. At the end of the day,
I'm just wondering if that's a way we could kind of
sure,
control
I
a
mean, if
little
we're not
bit by.
able to serve someone, I think that's a case we can make. If we can say, hey, you know, we don't have the water pressure, we don't have the capacity, I think that's something that, you know, like I said, there's gonna be kind of two little heads butting. You know, we may not see it as much in Casson, but, you know, some of those ring suburbs are definitely gonna be seeing that, where, you know, are you forcing Lakeville to build a new sewer plant now because they, you know, are being forced to serve a higher density or something like that? I think that's where a lot of the focus has been, on the edge suburbs, where a lot of the growth is.
Mhm.
But it'll definitely affect us in the long run. You know, we've already been talking about some more dense developments, and some of the concerns, you know, that the city engineer and myself have talked about, water pressure and capacity and things like that, are things that are gonna be real issues that have to be dealt with over time.
Yeah, I thought I remember reading on this that, is there a set lot size where, we can't restrict lot size bigger than a certain amount? Because I thought I read that in there, but I haven't seen it.
Yeah, there
in
are
there.
a couple of, I mean,
Maybe that
the
got
bills
struck.
are still being changed and tweaked as they go through committees.
Yeah.
At one point, they were saying, you know, 5,000 square feet, and there was someone else who said 4,000 square feet. So,
Which is a lot smaller than what we have, right?
yeah, I think, what do we have right now? Ian, is it 7,500? Or is it 9,000? 8,400, that would be 70 by 120.
8,000.
Yeah, so I think that is our standard lot size, is 70 by 120, so it's 8,400. Yeah.
8,000 is the minimum.
8,000, okay. So, yeah, so I mean, it's possible it'd be half of what's currently required.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, and it's a fluid process. You know, once the legislature actually gets done with it, then we'll know exactly, and there'll be lawsuits. I'm sure there'll be lawsuits on both sides, probably fighting about different things. A lot of it, you know, the Minneapolis 2040 plan was one of the catalysts for this, because Minneapolis, they approved a new comprehensive plan, and it included some of these criteria, and then there was a lawsuit that people who challenged it won, basically saying, nope, this isn't gonna go forward. Then some of the legislators from Minneapolis said, well, we're gonna change the state law, so that now those criteria in that comprehensive plan they meet state law, so the lawsuit's kind of moot, in essence.
They just override it, yeah.
Basically, legislature would, that's right.
So this is a city's problem, and it's getting kind of thrown at everybody else.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say, yeah, which is not unusual.
Well, you would think that our practice of development pays for development. You want to put a eightplex there, but the sewer needs to be upgraded, pay for it, and you can build your eightplex. But they're not gonna pay for it, because they're not gonna pay $1 million.
Whatever the requirement is,
cost,
yeah.
Okay, thank you. Anything else for Tim? All right, on to the engineer's report.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. In your packet is a highway user fund breakdown from the state of Minnesota. That ultimately is where our tax money that we pay through gas tax, license tax, whatnot, and how that all is broke down. You can see how that works out in the lower right-hand corner there. Shows where that comes into our MSAS fund, so we get a small little chunk of what is generated by the state, but we also are a small kind of player in the transportation fund. So that's just the FYI. MnDOT puts it out every year. It may look familiar to you. It's been in previous council packets, so no action on that, just information, or if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer that.
Okay, any questions for Brandon?
I mean, well, those funds did go up a week.
Yeah.
Which is great. So
Appreciate it.
it's more funding, so that's been good too, so.
Good.
So,
All right, thanks, Brandon, appreciate it. On to K, personnel, number 1, ag retirement. Jan will be retiring, that is in your packet. I'd like to thank Jan for her years of service at Casson, and wish her the best in retirement. So, with that, I'll entertain a motion to accept her retirement.
I'll make the motion.
Thanks, Mel, do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Thanks, Dan, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, thank you. Before we go to the closed session, any questions or comments on correspondence for any staff?
I did have one other thing I forgot to bring up.
Yep.
There's a bill going forward right now with the state. It's moving forward for trying to get local training for water and wastewater operators. And it's made it forward in the committee with promising me that it's going forward. They didn't change any of the language yet, so that's a good sign. It's something the Southeast League has been working on for 2 years now, and it's been jacketed, so I think, so.
Good. thank you. I forwarded that to you, I got that notification.
Yeah, and I sent on to Brenda, I did send her numbers, she had asked for some numbers
Yep.
on who would be potentially using it.
And the state was really impressed that they got numbers in one day from cities, so they
Good.
were
All right.
proud of that, so that helps.
Thanks, Dan. All right, with that, we're gonna close the meeting to a closed session to have an update on union negotiations. That will be recorded. When that's over, we'll reopen the meeting, and to adjourn. So with that, we're gonna close the meeting. Thanks for coming. If you're going home, drive safe. Thank you, and we'll close the meeting.